and somebody, not manically, but like genuinely says, "Good morning. You know, here's your coffee. Thank you, sir, miss, human." And then somehow, well, it is a good morning, isn't it? And then, has anybody ever experienced that? Good morning. And then the whole rest of your day, the day that was destined to become a day of grump, right? Now it's a day that started with a good morning. Down at Pete's, it all started down at Pete's today. And then, like that old, do you remember that old commercial? I don't remember what it's a commercial for, but, and then I told two friends, and they told two friends, and they told two friends, and so on, and so on. What was that a commercial for?
Shampoo.
The shampoo, okay. You know, and then everybody feels salon fresh. So today's sermon is about like, what would happen with a salon fresh world if our freshness just percolated out. So what am I supposed to tell you about? Yes. This morning we're going to learn about how plastic our brains and our emotions are, right? Because that's kind of weird that you could like be verifiably grumpy, right? Your partner, if you call them like, was so grumpy today? Yeah, they were a grump. You know, we could verify objectively your grumpiness. And then in the time it takes to brew a pour-over coffee with some hipster with too long of a beard or something like that, and smile, your mood just changed. That's weird, right? So we're going to play with how plastic that is, and the influence that we have on others. Because if we're that plastic, then everybody else is too. We will also learn how important that is. How important it is to know. I mean, has anybody ever noticed that our emotions are plastic, flexible in a negative way? Right? Like just one guy cuts you off, and then the whole rest of the day is ruined, right? You know, or like, I had a bad dream last night, and I got, I planned to get enough sleep and all this great stuff, and I got up this morning and kind of was like, and it was a dream, and yet it impacted me so much that like my whole brain state was kind of like thrown off a little bit. You know, that should have had a V8. I guess I'm just a commercial generator. So we know how important it is because if one little thing can set us off, then perhaps we're doing that one little thing all over. And we may even learn today that many of the problems that we face in the world are not only problems of strategy or problems of poverty or this or that. They're problems primarily of influence. They're problems of what messages are most pervasive. And what are those messages we receive when they act on that plastic brain emotional structure? What does that cause us to do? So our happiness is contagious. We are continual nexi of influence. And we're going to learn all about it. So the first thing we are going to learn about is a review of this notion. Maybe it's just for Cindy, I don't know. An extremely integral section for her last sermon with us for a while, called the Four Quadrants. This is developed by a philosopher named Ken Wilber. His work is contested by some and upheld by others, but this part of it is pretty cool. So what Wilber says is that in every event, in every moment, there are these four different sort of perspectives that are going on or that you can look at it from. So, for example, if we take you, any moment of you, if we put you in a fMRI machine or what's the EEG with the spiderweb hat thing, we could tell that in any moment, if you thought of banana or if you thought of a race car or something, these certain brain patterns would happen, right? Have you heard this on the street? It's big news, rumor going around, that brainwaves happen when you think of certain stuff, right? So in this model, we would call this the exterior of the individual, right? Or you could say the objectively observable portion of an event. This event that we're talking about is you. Does that make sense? So you can observe brainwaves. You can observe in fMRI the blood flow and the heat and the stuff, magnetism goes different places. Okay, but then what some books on consciousness studies I've read lately discount entirely, there's also in that moment a subjective experience, right? So it's not just brainwaves. There was somebody who had to think of the banana or the race car, right? I mean, if you answer no, you still prove my point because somebody just answered. Ha 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 ha. So in any moment, you've got the observable objectively, and then you've got the observable only really subjectively, right? You can't point to the one who's observing. You can only point to the correlates of that. Right? Okay. Okay. So then, it gets a little trickier because there's also the one we're concerned with today. We're going to leave that exterior collective off today. But the one we're concerned with today is the interior of the collective. The interior of the collective. And sometimes people refer to this as intersubjective experience. I'm going to say that 3 times because I'm an educator. Intersubjective experience. Sometimes they refer to it as intersubjective experience, right? So what this means, the subject is that one you can't really point to. I can't look at Anne and say, like, look, there's her consciousness. This is the big problem in consciousness research and why, like, psychology is a little harder to nail down with evidence than, like, physics or something like that. Because, like, who are we talking about? We can look at the correlates of who, but we can't actually point to the who, right? The who is an experience. So somehow they say, though, 2 subjects, 2 who's, can share an experience together, an intersubjective experience. So what I wonder is, how does that sound to you? I kind of go back and forth some days between kind of throwing out the 7th Unitarian principle and being like, well, the interconnected web, of course, but I'm me, you know, and there's no way I can really share because we're here. How could you share subjective experience, right? And then other days, I think, well, you know, I think I've experienced that. So what do you think? Who votes for there is such a thing as intersubjectivity? This is also how I tell who had their coffee or whether my sermon is really, really boring and incomprehensible. Okay, who votes for there's no such thing as intersubjective experience? Okay, and then I see the undecideds or the boards. Excellent, excellent. Would you call that the board exam? Board exam. Okay. So, by making little jokes like this, I'm trying to create intersubjective experience, right? If we can laugh together, we're sort of experiencing the same thing, right? And we're trying to show our rapport through these objective means. I observe, if I were a Vulcan, right, I observe your laughter, and therefore I can deduce, Captain, that we have shared this understanding together. Okay, intersubjective experience is sometimes also called we space. We space. So I like to think of it as this we space, and there's a little bit of fun evidence for such a thing. Let's see. So, a question that I would ask you is, have you ever had a moment where you felt you were communing with another person? Has anybody ever had a moment where you felt you were communing with another person, right? You looked into their eyes, you know, maybe it was your baby, maybe it was your intimate partner, right? And there was this moment of intimacy. Into me, I see. Except for in this case, it's into you, I see, I guess. Where you know you're sharing in that moment. There's no question in your mind. You know, if you dropped into questioning, it would stop. You'd be like, well, are we really sharing an experience, or is all this a hologram created from my solipsistic awareness, which is completely isolated? You know, but if you drop out of that for a second and you just drop into your awareness of the person, it's like, wait a minute, like this, there's something real going on. There's a shared experience. What's fun is that there is a little bit of evidence that shows that that's really happening. So your homework should you dare to accept it? Which principle is that? 3, I think. Encouragement toward our spiritual growth. Okay, so here's my your homework. Should you dare to accept it? Is turn off your cell phone, turn off your TV, your computer, your music, maybe some soft music, hard music, by Iron Star, something like that, and find a buddy or your intimate partner or something like that. Sit comfortably and gaze into their eyes for 5 minutes straight without saying anything. Okay, if you listen real close, you can hear that no one's breathing. It's a little bit scary because often what will happen to people who've never done any like meditation or hippie breath work training at SN or anything like that is like they'll start emoting and weeping just by looking in the person's eyes. Because one thing we start to notice is like all the music we turn on the phones and even the conversation that we hold is oftentimes a way to hide from this deep sense of sharing. And so there's been some research, I haven't looked it up, so you can look this up on your own, or I can get you a citation for later, but there's been some research that shows one of the quickest ways to develop rapport and understanding between people is you make them sit there and look into each other's eyes. And they report afterwards, like, I felt unified with this person. I felt like we were one person. I felt like I knew them and they knew me. And it's really weird because we don't often get to experience that. Right? Like, does anybody get to experience that 7 times a day or more? Okay, 5 times a day or more? 4 times a day or more? Okay, twice. I've got about twice. Do I hear twice? Do I hear 3 times? Do I hear 3? Okay, one time. Going once. Going, because it's 1 time. So we don't often get to experience this. Like, look into their eyes and like, oh wow, it's you, who's also kind of me, but every once in a while, has anybody ever experienced that? Like in a moment of grace, right? There's this thing of like, holy crud, man, we're in this together. Wow. Once upon a time, I used to hang out with these awesome New Age consciousness enthusiasts, and we would do this practice where for 3 or 4 nights straight, you build a big bonfire, and you have all the guys who took the African drumming class, guys and gals, hang out, and then you dance around the fire from sundown to sun up. Generally, you do this in the summer, so it's 8 hours instead of 12 hours that you have to dance around the fire. And there's this phenomenon that often happened that I observed in myself. You could start out and you're bringing, it's like, who's Scrooge's friend? The guy with all the chains? Right?
Marley.
Yeah, Marley, right? You're bringing all of this stuff, baggage with you. Like, oh, well, I can't open up it this way. Oh, I got to think about work. And then the weekend's over. I got to go do this stuff. And that lasts for maybe 2 hours. But if you keep on, like, just trudging around the campfire, dancing to the groove, then slowly you turn from Scrooge's Marley, like, into Bob Marley. And what we noticed, and this was a thing that we started to confirm anecdotally between this group of, large groups of people, is that at the end of the night, at the end of this fire circle, you would look across into the other person's eyes, and it's like we had created something together. The heart was open in a way that people rarely get to experience. And one of the things that we found is that through that ordeal, actually, we were able to create that sense we had done something together. Right? So perhaps in ancient times, when they would randomly roll giant stones up hills on logs to build worship to the god things, I wonder if people got to experience this together because they were undergoing these ordeals. Right? Or have you ever seen 2 boxers at the end of a really good match? Not those crummy matches where it's like nothing happens and the guy clenches but nothing happens. Not many boxing fans. Anyway, really good match. You can look at some of the old ones. They're beating each other up. The guy's standing there, and then he gets his win back, and he beats the other guy up. And then at the end, it's this contested decision. They both, look all crazy. None of them can see, and they're like whispering sweet nothings to each other. Oh man, good fight. I love you. Oh, man, God bless you. It's like people are crazy. But they've undergone this deep ordeal where they had to tune into the very soul of the other person there. And somehow now they feel like that's another me over there. This is an experience, like usually we only get through grace. You can have it down the street at Pete's. I've had this in a coffee shop. It might have been a coffee that did it. But you can have this, like somebody says, "Good morning, how are you?" And you're like, "Whoa, there's a human over there." But often it takes this grace to break through. Anyway, once upon a time, at the Max Planck Institute in 2012, they did a study on guitar players playing a duet. This was a sonata in G by a guy whose name I can't pronounce. And in this study, the two players were hooked up to, I believe it was EEG, I don't have it in the and they showed that in brain areas related to social cognition and movement, at many times during the play, their brains were in exact synchronization. Like a meditator's brain, the front part and the back part start to synchronize, and this is a rare state in one brain. So in these guys, these two people, their brain, both brains playing sonata. Trippy. So if you think that brain waves correlate to subjective experience, right? It's all in the science, for the last 20 years or something. Oh yeah, we found the part of the brain. This is the God part of the brain. And this is the chicken part of the brain. And this is where this emotion comes from, and that's where that experience comes from. So if those are real correlates to subjective experiences, we could say that these two people are sharing a subjective experience. Brainwaves are the same. The objectively observable portion is the same. If we can correlate that objective portion to subjective experiences, then they're having the same subjective experience. There is this intersubjective thing going on. Cool. Sneeze on the truth, they say. This was also, any dancers, any partner dancers in the room? Ballroom, tango, salsa. Have you ever experienced this, dancing with a person? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wasn't going to talk about intimate connections, but there was a research on tango dance, actually, and one researcher did it. She did a kind of demonstration of this, where they projected. They had this image of these two brains, and when the brainwaves synced up significantly, these two lights that were projecting the brains would go like this, right? And so you can watch on the video, as these people are starting, and the music starts, and the brains go. It's like, whoa. So they're visually representing how much shared experience these two dancers are having. That's just cool, right? So, intersubjectivity is a thing. Another study showed that long-term couples, and even counselors and their patients, develop a type of mind reading, where if you test them, their brainwaves are synchronized. And for the couples and counselor-patient relationships who have achieved that brainwave synchronization, they can tell what the other person is going to say. Right? This may not be like psychic research or something like that. It may just be that think about it, if you're having the same subjective experience, because you've got the same brainwave, you know what's going on in the other person, right? Is it because you're reading their body language or their breath, or you can subconsciously see their pulse and their carotid? I'm not sure. But somehow, humans are capable of mind reading. Bum, bum, bum. That's pretty neat. And then, if you want to go to the fringe just a little bit, I know we have some staunch materialists in the room, and then some quantumly entangled New Age frontier psychiatrists. And so I want to speak to everybody. But if you want to dance on the fringe, there is a large body of research that says, on a subtle level, not like, well, I'm going to think $100 into my pocket, and the quantum zero field, well, dang, it didn't work again. But statistically significant, subtle changes. Like they have people sit in front of a random number generator, these quantum collapse things, right? And intend a certain number, right? And if you weren't statistically analyzing it, it doesn't look like anything happens, right? But if you were, there's this 0.006 effect where you slant what numbers are coming out of the thing. Like, if they do like a 0 and 1, they say, like 10 toward 1, and there's this just slight little effect toward 1. So you can look this up, and it's kind of interesting. I'm not going to give you my argument for why you should trust that large field of research and not trust the Journal of the American Medical Association or something like that. But just look it up and see what happens. So there's a whole other notion that if the electromagnetic field of your heart goes out 16 feet or so, the electromagnetic field of your brain goes out a little ways, wouldn't that possibly fiddle with the electromagnetic field of your friend? I don't know. You have to look it up on your own. You're breathing in and out all of this dead Shakespeare and kind of things like that. So check it out. Okay, back to whatever that thing is. Mirror neurons. These are also hot in the psychological science of the day. You've heard of them from me, I'm sure. Who's never heard of a mirror neuron? Okay, then I will tell you what a mirror neuron is. Once upon a time in the late 70s, researchers in Italy had monkeys hooked up to these, I forget what kind of brain scan because I didn't write the anecdote about these monkeys, and they found that when the researcher demonstrated an action, the motor areas of their brain for doing that action would light up. And they called these over time, they called these mirror neurons. So we have these things in our brain that look at the actions that another person does and basically tries that on in our own feeling body. Right? We do the action on a subtle level. Right? It's not like eat the banana, but my brain just did that. Right? So this is really kind of cool because if I smile at you, your brain for a second just smiled back at me. Like, part of this is because as the most evolved of apes, 90-some-odd% of sciences consensus on that we are the most evolved of apes. We are dependent on our social interactions. Right? This is what makes humans so adaptable. And our brains developed to be able to tell whether someone's mad or happy, or whether someone's actually mad, but pretending that they're happy. I'm really glad you all came out to the UUFLG today. What kind of monkey? I'm a stressed monkey. So don't be that guy. And we're so good at this that in order to convey happiness to another, we actually have to do what they call the Duchenne smile. I think it's D-U-C-H-E-N-N-E, Duchenne smile. And that's the one where your eyes crinkle a little bit. Right? So there are certain politicians out there, I won't name any names, who they get these vast waves of distrust because when they smile, their eyes are actually going like this or something like that. But their smile is smiling, and people innately go like, oh my God. The monkey in me sees the monkey in you and doesn't trust it at all. Whereas occasionally people, they smile genuinely, and something inside of us, we point to right here because there's epinephrine and different things that actually affect our heart, but it's starting, the cascade is starting up here, right? We're watching their body language, we're trying it on. And then here's the other cool thing. A researcher in micro-expressions who's doing a lot to help people with Asperger's and autism now. While trying to catalog these different expressions and what they mean, the team of researchers were trying them on. They were doing this photo shoot of okay, here's the micro-expression for disappointment, and here's this. And they found on the days where they were doing sad or angry emotions, they would all leave the lab in a terrible mood. And on the days when they were doing happy emotions, it didn't matter what mood they started in, they would all leave feeling uplifted. Because these little motor neurons in your brain pan tell you how you feel. So again, we have this intersubjectivity. We like to believe that, well, my emotions are mine and they start here. No. Even if I just flashed that first slide, that sad face emoticon, right? tend to fill out questionnaires happier when they're looking at this one or were primed with this one, and sadder. Like if you ask them about their life in general, how's your life going? How's your relationship? If you primed them with the smiley emoticon, they say, oh, pretty decent. Oh yeah, it needs a little bit of work. If you prime them with the frowny one, they say, oh yeah, everything's terrible. So you are not really even you emotionally. Okay. I had a who am I moment. It's a little scary, but we're back. Existential dread has been held at bay for one more day. Thank the humanists who have come before me. So I noticed this effect myself. My first profession was as a receptionist and a customer service helper. Has anybody ever done customer service jobs or reception, especially phone reception? So maybe you got taught in the way that I got taught, but when the phone rings, first thing you do, second thing you do, and then when you answer the phone, good afternoon, H&R Block, downtown Redlands, how may I help you? Because people can hear, somehow our little ears are made to hear the curl of your lips. It's so weird. And what, like if you find in sales, if you smile at the person, they will give you more money. It's so smart. So, but how many of us, think about taking a deep breath and smiling before we talk to our intimate partner, our children, our neighbor's children? It doesn't quite compute, and yet it's so potent. So our posture, our facial expression has a big impact on how we feel, as well as how the people around us feel. Because we've been sitting for a moment, we need to do a little postural exercise. So this is one I'll give you in a second when we get into tips and tricks about happiness in just a few minutes. But I'd like to do this. So if you are willing and or able, you can stand for this one. You can also do this in your chair. There she is. Power posing. There's a great TED Talk on this. If you want to hear a little more about the research, you can look up our Power Poses TED Talk, or you look up Superwoman or Wonder Woman Pose TED Talk. So here it goes. Hands on the hips. And we're going to exaggerate this one. So you're going to puff up your chest. And in this case, you're going to elevate your gaze. And then smile confidently. Now you're supposed to hold this for a minute. I think we're going to probably do 30 seconds or something like that. And as you do this, we're going to breathe like you're a ruler of the universe. Yes. Okay, 2 more deep breaths. Now gaze out and survey your fellow rulers of the universe. Yes, isn't it wonderful to rule the universe together, Maria? Indeed. Okay, go ahead and have a seat, if it is your will. Okay, other than a little lightheaded like I feel, does anybody feel the other kind of uplifted? It's a little bit uplifting, right? So then this makes a challenge, which I'm not going to talk about today, but if we have a culture that does this all the time, and then have you seen what's on the news lately? So they're not only going like this, they're going like this, or like this, or like this. Head down, chest collapsed, facial expression, shock, terror, dismay, sadness, frustration, anger, rage, resentment. Right? And you can, as I say these words, they prime our psychology. I'm like, whoa, unprime your psychology, man. So if we just knew how much of an impact our posture and our facial expression has on it, how much more could we take charge of this plasticity in our bodies and brains? So, what's up with the contagion? I think we've laid the groundwork for how social contagion takes place. Again, if you want another little topic to research, you can type in keywords social contagion. And there's been a lot of research on social contagion. A famous incident is called the June bug incident, where this group of factory workers, one of them thought they saw some strange bug. And then they got these strange symptoms, oh, I feel nauseous, I feel itchy. And then all over the factory, everybody started feeling nauseous and itchy. and there was never any bug, and there was never any actual infection going on. The notion that such a, you could call it nocebo or something like that, right? You know, the placebo effect gone wrong, but how it spreads, how this sense that, oh yes, this is a true idea, spreads. A little quote from a doctoral fellow at Stanford that I thought really just hit this on the head. Social scientific research has largely confirmed the thesis that affect, meaning emotionality, attitudes, beliefs, and behavior can indeed spread through populations as if they were somehow infectious. Simple exposure sometimes appears to be sufficient condition for social transmission to occur. The social contagion thesis, this is the part that I underline here, that sociocultural phenomena can spread through and leak between populations more like outbreaks of measles or chickenpox than through a process of rational choice. That sociocultural phenomena can spread through and leak between populations more like outbreaks of measles and chickenpox than through rational choice. So, something about, there's another study, again, I didn't find the citation, but it's fresh in my mind. They were looking at decision making, and they had people wired up very sensitive equipment, and they said, okay, now I want you to decide to move your arm, and then move your arm. And what they found was that before the person decided to move their arm, other little stuff under the radar of their brain decided for them. Right? They pinpointed, the person said, okay, now, right? And before that, the brain went, and what it pointed to in this study, they can probably explain it better if I found you a real citation of why this points to this, but the person we think is making the decisions is an afterthought to whoever's really making the decisions. Okay? That means that all of these, the field of decision theory, right? All of these cognitive biases and negative biases, confirmation biases and stuff like that. When someone comes along and says, there's this June bug, and part of your brain maybe says like, oh, that'll get me off of work for a couple of days, right? Or that'll make me part of the group subconsciously, or I'm really afraid of that. This brain immune system connection thing goes ahead and makes you sick, regardless of exposure to any infectious agent. When somebody says, we gotta watch out for so-and-so, and this is really dangerous, blah, 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 blah. If you believe that, if you've got enough subconscious information saying that's a reasonable hypothesis, you just buy it before even thinking about it, right? You caught the social infection. So that's sort of a good news, bad news proposition, don't you think? Right? Okay. So now we're supposed to talk about the news. The news. The news is, I don't know if you've been watching it, but it's kind of troubling, I think. So, and I posted on my Facebook, I'm about to say the same thing if you are online and you read that, but I started to think like, wait a minute, should I be giving a sermon that's like, happiness, hey, let's all just like praise our lives in Los Gatos where the sun always shines, and because that's a little false, it's a little out of touch with reality. But the thing to know is that that's not the only type of happiness. We tend to think about happiness, they call hedonic happiness. The happiness that says, if it feels good, it must be right. This is probably, the type of happiness that people who promote hate of other people, that people who promote social inequity. Because, well, it feels good to me, it must be right. This is not the kind of happiness that I'm talking about today. If that happiness was contagious, and it is, we could see outbreaks of narcissism. Right? That's not the world that I want to call into existence. But the thing that we might want to know is that there's another kind of happiness, which is a happiness based on values. A happiness based on living in touch with who you think your true self is. The true self that the ancient Greeks called the daemon. Not demon, okay, we're in church. The daemon, that soul messenger that tells you what's true, good, and beautiful. They call this in modern research eudaimonic happiness. happiness, that which supports the daemon, that which supports your deepest inner self. So imagine what might happen if you were able to softly smile or authentically grieve and transmit the in touch with your virtue sense to everyone around you. I think that's one of the reasons why we really benefit by coming together in this community here. These are people all around you on every side that found their way here because they feel that treating others and ourselves well is a fundamental virtue of life. Like that first paragraph of the Declaration of Independence, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. These are inalienable rights, and they're deep in our heart. So when you come on Sunday, it almost doesn't matter what I blab about here, as long as we get the chance to look into that other who and feel their values reflecting back at us. Because it's a hard world out there. Have you noticed? Right? Even if you're among the privileged classes, races, or sexual orientations, it's still a hard, doggone world out there. Especially if you're trying to keep your values, if you're trying to be a nexus of this kind of happiness, the kind of happiness that radiates out and supports others no matter what they're going through in their life. If we can come together and look in someone's eyes and get a transmission of that happiness, something multiplicatory, maybe even exponential happens, where it's not just that we add up all the happiness in the room. We can start to multiply the happiness. We can use each other to create more of this infectious, it's like a reverse chemical warfare. Chemical, what's that evil kind of anthrax stuff that the U.S. sold to somebody and then we found and went to war with them or something like that. Anyway, disease warfare. It's like the inverse of that. If we come together, we create anti-disease, and then each one of you is a carrier. That's right. I've infected you already this morning with my Duchenne smile. Okay, so it's not just that I want you to be happy. Well, that guy, he's a Buddhist. He wants everybody to be happy. No, we must be happy. Because it's not just we space when we choose to create it. It's we space all the time. If you feel powerless, if you feel angry, if you feel frustrated, gosh darn it, I empathize with you. And we have to know that that's what we transmit and infect others with. If we can find a way to return to that well of values, that while we may be sad, while we may be struggling, we can source a spark of hope. We can source a spark of joy even while we mourn. Then we become a gift to others. We might become that central nexus that spreads my latest crafted disease of eudaimonic happiness throughout the world. I want to give you a few tips on happiness, just in case you need help with this. And they have to go fast because I'm out of time. Number one, fake it. It actually works, right? You can't overdo this. You can't use it to bypass your emotions, right? If you have emotions, go get a therapist. That could be a bumper sticker. If you have emotions, go get. But remember, we just did this. And it's evidence-based. If you just put a smile on your face, you will start to get happier. Be like old Reverend Father when he was a receptionist. Pretend you're happy, you get other people's money, and you will actually be happy and get their money. And it's a great life. Okay. Number two, change postures. So if you're feeling miserable, go for a walk. Has anybody ever done that and succeeded? Right? If you want to do it on the regular, take up a yoga practice. You can't every day go like this and stay bummed out, right? Your body won't believe you. I'm so sad. Put on music and dance, right? Change it. And this leads into the third one. as you're dancing, you can also honor your grief and mourning. You don't get happier by pretending that things don't hurt. But when we grieve and when we mourn, it's like a little signifier from our values. It's a little thing that says, that doesn't jive with my heart. That calls me to action. That calls me, your tears can be as much of a gift as your smile. Number 4, cultivate learned optimism. Because your brains are plastic, because they wire with things you place strong attention on and do habitually, if you look for the good, you will tend to see it more and more. And number 5, remember our 7th Unitarian Universalist principle, which is that we honor the interconnected web of life of which we are all a part. For me, I find myself getting sunk, reveling in my discomfort rather than honoring my mourning. One of the quickest ways to snap me out of it is to realize that I'm not in it by myself, and I'm not in it for myself. I'm not being happy just for me. I'm being happy because really there is no me. The thing I think is myself has come from all of you, and vice versa. So happiness is our right and also our responsibility. The world, this guy wrote, the world is so messed up right now, we really need to get happy. So, hopefully this sounds paradoxical. The world's so messed up, we really need to be happy right now. Things could go wrong in so many ways that it's time we were optimistic. Okay, hopefully those don't sound paradoxical anymore. And if they don't, I've done my job this morning. So